Happy New Year and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our 2 games is 2019's Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, the Kickstarter darling that tried to recapture the feel and gameplay of Castlevania games like Symphony of the Night, outside of Konami's influence.
Following that is a short but charming title about being bored indoors while rain has spoiled your fun plans for the day, 2020's Rainy Season.
Happy New Year indeed! You'll be hearing about it more at the end of this month, but we are coming up on 3 full years complete of this show. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that kind of snuck up, huh?
It's a little scary. We'll have a Super Smash Brothers themed episode at the end of the month to celebrate and mark that occasion. But wow, 2022, everybody. Welcome.
And then who the hell knows what we're going to do for year 4, because we're out of Smash games at that point.
Do we go back to 64? Like, I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah, it's a lot. But Happy New Year, everybody. We made it through 2021. Maybe 2022 won't suck.
Well,
I say that with little faith in that being true, but maybe.
We'll keep our fingers crossed there. Our games this week are tied together by probably the most strenuous connection of a theme yet. For what it's worth, they are games that you can play this month for $10 or less. That's really the best we could come up with.
Yep. I picked a really, really weird game to talk about, but I'm glad I picked it because I think it's going to be fun. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about your game because I happen to have bought it in the recent eShop sale. So I own it on Switch. It's installed right now.
Exciting. In the meantime, Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
So I finished Danganronpa 2, got a review out there, all that, pretty good. I liked it. And next, Matt and I are going to stream V3 together.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a disaster because when it comes to waifus, me and Matt seem to have completely opposite opinions, except for we both agree that Peko is best girl in 2. Sonya Nevermind is a very close second. I also played like a little puzzle game called Time Lie, which is like a time-based puzzle game where you gotta like sneak around robots and stuff, and there's also a cat you can play as. It's really weird, but it was really interesting, and I think if you like puzzle games, you should look into it. And other than that, I'm in the second jail in Persona 5 Strikers because I finally sat down and started it.
Sick.
It's pretty good so far. I like playing as An and Yusuke the most, but Makoto is up there and obviously Joker. They had to make him good because you don't have a choice. He's in the party.
I am looking forward to getting around to that as well. I haven't played a lot of video games this week, as you may have caught on the video version at the top of the show. I no longer have a green wall behind me that I can key in Café LeBlanc.
Oh, no.
That's unfortunate. It is gray at the moment to match the other walls in the room because we are getting our condo ready for selling. I think we're within like the 2-month range of the madness that will ensue. So it's going to be a crazy time. Not exactly sure how video games are going to fit in, especially with Pokemon Legends Arceus eyeing me up at the end of the month. We'll see how that goes.
It's just a couple weeks away, huh? Oh, boy.
That's a little scary. In the meantime, let's talk about some composer follow-up news. Just a couple articles here to touch on as we've gone through best of 2021 and all of this stuff. And going into the new year, kind of a slow time for video game news, but a couple headlines to talk about. Hey, let's talk about that Persona 5 Strikers game there. I know you bought it at the beginning of 2021. You're nice and gave the devs your money, but it's now a free PlayStation Plus game for the month of January.
I just started it. I just started it on PC. I'm too far in. I'm like 15 hours in now.
Well, at least add it to your library there. And of course, this features music from Atsushi Kitajo, as well as original compositions from Shoji Meguro. It was also number 4 on our Best of 2021 list. So, hey, if you're a PlayStation Plus member, go add that to your library and maybe play it.
And like, hey, if you heard the clip of the version of Last Surprise from Persona 5 Strikers in the show, the whole damn song is incredible. Best version of Last Surprise, actually. Meanwhile, this is a bit of a weird one. Hades is the first ever video game to win a Hugo Award, which is a literary prize. I watch a game news show that China just takes the piss out of stuff like this, talk about it. And there was some weird politics behind this and the creation of this category. But yeah, they did a video game category as a one-off unless they decide to continue it next year or something. Look up Checkpoint. You can probably find it. It's really weird the way they got it to work. But other nominees included The Last of Us 2, Spiritfarer, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Animal Crossing New Horizons, and the funniest of all, Blaze Ball. As I said, the category is under consideration to become permanent.
But yeah, weird for it to get a literary prize for what's normally science fiction and fantasy. I guess it's a good thing to include video games in that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of video games that are that, and Hades is very much worthy of being the first game to get that. So we'll see if that continues. That's it's really cool and also super unexpected.
Not music related, but you know, it's good for recognizing video games as art and all that, which we need more of. Let's talk about our first game this week, though. It is a game that has been delayed quite a few times for inclusion on this show, which, you know, it only matters how many times it got delayed in real life. This is Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. And Bloodstained Ritual of the Night released on June 18th, 2019 for PS4, Xbox One, and PC. It was out the next week, June 25th, for Nintendo Switch, and iOS and Android got a version of the game on December 3rd, 2020. It ties into our theme this week because it is apparently a free game on Google Stadia Pro during January 2022. So if you are a Stadia Pro member, free game. There you go. If you're not a Stadia Pro member and you want to play this game for as cheaply as possible, it's $10 to be a Stadia Pro member. But honestly, that's kind of around the price that you might be able to find it on sale normally. It's like $20 normally. So
you'd get a playable version of the game in that case.
Well, there you go. The game is developed by Artplay, with additional development by WayForward and Neo Future Labs. Mobile ports were developed in association with NetEase, and the game is published by 505 Games. I don't think we've ever mentioned 505 Games on the show before until last week, or the week before Best of 2021, when I brought up Control. And so now it's back-to-back single games I'm talking about that's published by 505. That's a little weird.
I was going to say, didn't they publish Skullgirls? But no, I'm thinking of Indivisible. They published that.
Yeah. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is a 2.5D side-scrolling Metroidvania game. And as a definition refresher, if you are unfamiliar with what a Metroidvania game is, it's essentially a platform action game with a large interconnected world map that the player can explore. Though access to parts of the world, it's often limited by doors or other obstacles that can only be passed once the player has acquired special items, tools, weapons, abilities, or knowledge within the game. The main character has a variety of weapons at their disposal. Generally, it's described as either a sword or whip, but then other weapons come into play as well. And you can also use special abilities by equipping shards. So, the plot of Bloodstained, the game opens on a bunch of text, which duly copied and pasted here. And so let's see if it makes sense to you. Quote, The Industrial Revolution ushered in a new era that threatened to transform the values of men. No longer would spirituality be their compass, but not all welcomed the change. In 1783, just as the fires of the Laki eruption had plunged all of Europe into an ashen darkness, a horde of demons spilled from the shadows and fell upon city after English city. It was a message. The Alchemy Guild, fearing the rise of industrialism and abandonment by their wealthy patrons, had done the unthinkable to defend their existence. Through recondite arts, the alchemists had created Shardbinders, humans transplanted with crystal that attuned them to demonic power. They sacrificed the Shardbinders, and in doing so, threw the gates of the world open to demonkind. Countless innocents died, and though the church succeeded in vanquishing the Hellsent, a steep price had already been paid and collected. As for the Shardbinders, they were presumed to have all died in the sacrificial rite. However, 2 survived. Jeeble, a boy for whom, by some miracle, the rite did not prove fatal, and Miriam, a girl who was spared the rite altogether on account of the strange slumber that took her just before it could begin. 10 years have passed, and mankind too soon forgets tragedy. The demons have returned, presaged by a great castle. And on this very hour, Miriam awakens. Upon learning Jeeble is the architect of this new blood-stained ritual, Miriam and the alchemist Johannes set forth for the accursed castle. Their galleon cuts through the water, lancing toward the inevitable. Basically, the overarching question is, can Miriam stop Jeeble's dark ambition? So, Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Bloodstained Ritual of the Night?
Well, I mean, I played Symphony of the Night last year, and
So you basically played this, got it.
That sounds almost exactly like Symphony of the Night, just without Dracula. Which, I mean, that is what the game was essentially supposed to be. It's right what it says on the tin. I've not played it, like I said earlier. I bought it in the eShop sale recently, so it is currently taking up 7 goddamn gigs of my micro SD card. And eventually I'll get to it, though I have, like, 2 Metroidvanias I think I should probably get to first.
Yeah, Ori and Ori Will of the Wisps.
On Switch, yeah, it's Ori and the Blind Forest, and then Will of the Wisps I'll probably play on PC. But also, I bought Blasphemous, though I don't know if I'm going to play that at any point soon, because I'm an idiot, but I'm probably forgetting one somewhere as well. But Bloodstained is definitely on my list. I very, very much want to give it a shot.
Well, yeah, I think especially if you played Symphony Night as you did last year for Smash Your Pieces, your other podcast. Yeah, I think that's a good one to get to eventually, but you've essentially, you've played the game already. I was a backer for Bloodstained in the way that, like, I have tried Symphony of the Night. I didn't get too far in it. Maybe with a new modern game design, I'll appreciate it more. And so then I got to play it pretty close to launch, like within the first couple months after downloading it on PS4. I enjoyed what I played, and I got a little bit into it, but not all that far. Like, for those that played it, I got past the first Zangetsu fight, and then I hit a wall of progression where, like, it felt like wherever I went, I was getting my butt kicked. And
so it is Symphony of the Night.
Yeah, so exactly. Right. So yeah, that's kind of where I last approached Bloodstained, but this is one I've wanted to talk about on the show for a while, particularly for one of its opening songs, and then just wanted to kind of delve into the soundtrack a little bit more. But yeah, it's a good one for sure. So as we've mentioned quite a few times already, Bloodstained is a spiritual successor to the Castlevania series by Konami, of which Koji Igarashi had been the series producer from 2001 to 2010. So fans generally refer to these as the Igavania games. But Igarashi left Konami in March 2014, and after years of fan requests for new Castlevania-like games, plus the financial success of the Kickstarter for the Mega Man-like Mighty No. 9, Igarashi pitched a game concept to more than 20 publishers, but nobody bit. And so it was a time of great Kickstarter success for video games with Mighty Number 9, and before that, Shovel Knight.
Ukulele around the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a time of, well, if nobody's going to make this retro-inspired game, we'll make it ourselves, with your help. And so after some funding was finally acquired from different sources, a Kickstarter launched on May 11th, 2015, with Igarashi seeking to gain $500,000 to secure funding that would cover the remaining 10% of development costs. Well, the goal had been reached within 4 hours of going live, and it reached $1.5 million within the first day. Bloodstained's $5.5 million in pledges was the highest total for a video game backer project at the time, until a little game called Shenmue 3 showed up at E3 2015, and its $6.3 million would surpass it a couple months later. Among the stretch goals included getting famed Solid Snake voice actor David Hayter to be cast as a character in the game. While the original plan was for him to be Jeeble, he would end up playing Zangetsu, a demon hunter from Japan. Now, the goal was originally to have Bloodstained Ritual of the Night launch in 2017, as well as have Wii U and Vita versions. But then delays happened, especially with the amount of work and man hours, along with overall inexperience of the team with Unreal Engine 4, to especially complete some of the concepts that were wanted in the game. This led Igarashi to bring in additional studios and push back the release date quite a few times, and ultimately cancel unsupported platforms. Oh look, Nintendo Switch is a thing, and Vita is not being supported by PlayStation. In the meantime, Inti Creates also would develop a companion game called Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, which was an NES-styled platform game with Miriam and Jeeble as playable characters, along with Zangetsu and the alchemist Alfred. This game released first in May 2018. Overall, when Ritual of the Night came out, it reviewed fairly well, with a Metacritic average of 83 on PS4 and PC, 84 on Xbox One, but 74 on Switch. A lot of people noted how very much anchored it was to games like Symphony of the Night, for better or for worse. Saying it has great gameplay, great art style, great music, all that, but it's anchored in a gameplay that is, from like almost 20 years ago. So if you like Symphony of the Night, you'll like Bloodstained. It also had a polarizing art style, and there were some tech issues, especially on Switch. On Switch, so much so that they had to release several smaller updates on Switch instead of single bigger updates on the other platforms.
Yeah, our Matt is the one who did the review for the Switch version of Bloodstained. It was rough when it came out. Like real rough. I believe they have fixed it since. But yeah, no, it was bad when it came out on the Switch at first.
Yeah. But overall, it sold quite well. It sold over 1 million copies as of June 2020. Did not make any appearances in the big video game award shows, though. No Game Awards, no BAFTAs, no DICE Awards. It was nominated for the Off-Broadway Award for Best Indie Game at the New York Game Awards, and it was nominated for Most Promising New Intellectual Property at the South by Southwest Gaming Awards. It would borrow Shovel Knight's model of releasing big updates over time post-release, adding in new modes, things like that. Miriam, Zangetsu, Jeeble, and Alfred also appeared in the 2018 strategy RPG Kingdom 2 Crowns as part of a crossover event in April 2020. There was also some crossover with Blasphemous, or at least a planned one. I think there was like an arrangement of one of the tracks that was planned. I don't know if it actually went through though, but you mentioned Blasphemous. I'm like, oh, there was something I read in the research about that. A sequel to Curse of the Moon was announced in June 2020, and it released the next month, while a sequel to Ritual of the Night was announced as being in development in June 2021. Koji Igarashi had stated that given the amount of time he has spent in developing the Bloodstained intellectual property, he sees Ritual of the Night as a starting ground for future Bloodstained games. Let's talk about the composer, though, because we've covered the main composer on the show before, but among the list of composers is Keisuke Ito. And Keisuke Ito was born on January 19th, 1975 in Tokyo, Japan. He has blood type A, and he started playing the piano in high school. He graduated from Tohoku Gakuen University with a degree in history. But he began some band activities while studying there, and he only started composing after graduating. He would eventually establish Noisy Croak, which is a sound production company with Atsuhiro Ishizuna and Hideki Sakamoto. You can follow him on Twitter at Booksito, at BOOKSITO. Interesting to see some of the games that Keisuke Ito has worked on, because he seems to be the main composer for the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series. At least starting with, I think they were the second games. This would be Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky, as well as Gates to Infinity, Super Mystery Dungeon, and the recent Rescue Team DX. Did music composition for those games. He did minigame music production for Yakuza 3 and Ryuga Gotoku Kenzan, which is a Japanese exclusive game that I think is like 400 years before the main Yakuza events.
Bring it to the West.
Yeah, some side spin-off game there. Of course, he composed for Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, as well as Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. His recent projects, though, are the Somnium Files, and he is currently working on the Nirvana Initiative sequel.
Which will hopefully be talking about that game when Nirvana Initiative comes out.
Yeah, that would be really cool. We'd like to mention when a composer has done work for the Super Smash Bros. Games, and Keisuke Ito did some arrangement work on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, being the Galeem and Darkon battle themes. For Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, the composers include Michiru Yamane, Keisuke Ito, Ryusuke Fujioka, Ippo Yamada, and Atsuhiro Ishizuna. So yes, we've talked about Michiru Yamane for her work on Symphony of the Night. See how that's all tied together. Wow. I talked about that pretty early in the show's history, I think. Now, for Bloodstained, Yamane started out with the concept art, story snippets, and general information about the game's universe, before then talking to Iga to put the finishing touches on the piece. They've worked together for about 20 years. They seem to have a flow that kind of goes pretty well together, so it all worked out. Unfortunately, interviews were mostly covered with Bloodstained and Michiru Yamane when the Kickstarter was doing its big press push, and there didn't seem to be too much else available there. So that said, let's get into the 5 critical tracks for Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. And we start with this first one that really caught my ear when I played. It's Voyage of Promise. This track is composed by Michiru Yamane, and it plays in the galleon Minerva, which is the name of the haunted ship at the beginning of the game. It's kind of the tutorial level, and so, wow, what a track to play when you're kind of learning how to control Miriam and how to defeat enemies and explore the world of Bloodstained. But yeah, you're on this ship, and it's a great groove here with the drums and the strings. You listen to this, and if you've listened to Symphony of the Night's music, I think it immediately harkens back to that soundtrack. But also in a way where it's not like I don't know if they're using like the newest technology in a way. It sounds to me, at least, like the virtual instruments aren't the most modern samples they could be. It's not like it's channeling like, oh, we're pretending that we're recording a live orchestra or whatever. No, there's definitely some retro sound to these instruments. And I feel like that's intentional in a way to kind of call back to the Symphony of the Night vibes, but still has a more, modern, not bit crunched sound to it. Sounds great for sure, but you're like, oh yeah, this has like a Dracula's castle feel to it.
See, the vibes I get even more so than Symphony from this song is Rondo. Rondo of Blood.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Like this sounds straight out of Rondo of Blood, which is a good thing. Rondo of Blood is a very, very, very good game with a very good soundtrack. This sounds Castlevania in general is the point. Like they're not even hiding it with this one.
I think that's the point of the soundtrack overall, is they are not hiding the Castlevania inspirations. And that continues to the next one, number 2 on the Critical 5, Luxurious Overture. Wouldn't you have guessed it, also composed by Michiru Yamane. Now this plays at the entrance to Gebel's castle. I also gotta say for the record, Gebel, and the pronunciation they go with in the game is Gebel. It's a weird one. I don't get it.
I've never had a pet Gebel, but I've heard they're very easy to keep alive.
Don't put them in suspicious places. Don't put your Gebels in suspicious places. I feel like this definitely, again, channels the Symphony of the Night vibes here, right? Especially when you're talking about a castle entrance. Though it does feel a little more Baroque. Of course, you're getting the driving drums here, at least in the beginning of the piece, not necessarily in the clip here that we've used, but you're getting strings, and then the harpsichord comes in, and yes, nothing says Baroque quite like harpsichord. And then the flute comes in. I think it's a nice little kind of mix up from what Voyage of the Promise was, sounding kind of similar, but at least in this part of the clip, it's kind of like the down part of the piece before then building back up. So it sounds nice. I appreciate the use of the different instruments here.
It's the strings that does it in terms of the Castlevania, though. Like at the very beginning, 100% those strings are Castlevania as hell. Mm-hmm. The harpsichord is also up there. I agree. And again, I feel like video games are the only thing left that still uses the harpsichord for things. I don't hear it anywhere else.
That's true. We brought it up a few times on this show, and I don't know if it's necessarily in film or anything like that. That's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. I like the harpsichord.
Yeah, but I don't know if you're seeing Taylor Swift drop it on her next album release.
I would buy 3 copies of that album if she did. I'm not going to lie.
Love Story, harpsichord version.
Do it, Taylor. They'll buy anything you put out. Do it. Yeah, this is a really, really good song, but it is another one where it's just like, oh man, you're just unabashedly making Castlevania Symphony of the Night again in terms of music. And hey, you know what? Ain't a bad thing.
Let's listen to number 3 on the Critical 5, though, and this adds some more electric guitar to it. It is Gears of Fortune. It's like if Gears of War and Wheel of Fortune had a title baby. It's composed by Ryusuke Fujioka, and it plays in the Towers of Twin Dragons. This one is also prominent because it is featured regularly in promotional videos for the game, and I think that's probably because it is just immediately engaging to listen to. I think you get the rhythm, the drums going at the nice pace there, and then the backing electric guitar kind of gives it more of a depth than some of Yamane's other earlier works in the game have. And then you get the violin come in, and once a second violin layer is added for like double violins, I mean, game over. Like that's just so good. It's a good song to listen to. And again, yeah, you do think Castlevania. Again, that's the point of this game and this soundtrack. But it's nice to get a different composer's flair in there with Fujioka.
I think this might actually be my favorite song in the Critical 5. It's really, really good, and the violin work just in this song in general is fantastic. And yeah, it does still sound a lot like Castlevania, but I think this one feels a little bit more like its own identity, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like this doesn't just sound like, oh, we made Castlevania Symphony of the Night 2. Here's the soundtrack. This is in that same vein, but feels a bit more separate, I guess.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that's the fresh voice kind of adding to it with the composer. There's a track called Lost Garden where it's literally Yamane being like, you remember Marble Garden from Symphony of the Night? Here it is, but with some small mix-ups. And it's like, we see you, Yamane-san. Let's get to a very different piece for number 4 on the Critical 5, though. And this is Forgotten Jade. Once again composed by Michiru Yamane, and this plays in the Forbidden Underground Waterway. So I think this is kind of around the point of the game, actually, that I stopped playing. It's an icy, atmospheric piano track, and it sounds totally different, but at the same time, like, yeah, this is Castlevania atmospheric work, for sure. I also really appreciate, as you hear, the trickling water sound effects. It sounds so good mixed in there, and especially if you're listening with headphones, that's a nice touch for kind of giving the song some spatial awareness there. But yeah, a totally different song, a more relaxed, chill, atmospheric vibe, and we always love a bit of piano in there, right?
Yeah, but for some reason, I feel like the acoustic guitar clashes with the piano. In a way that I'm not a huge fan of. I don't know what it is about it, but the guitar kind of sounds almost like it is out of tune. I don't know. I that's a bit off-putting to me, but otherwise, like, this is a really good song. That's a theme for us, by the way, Trickling Water.
Oh.
There's a song in my game that has a raindrop sound effect at one point. There we go. We did it.
Okay, it works. It's we had to make something work somehow, and I'm glad we got there in the end. Let's wrap up the Critical 5 with the theme of Bloodstained. This is a vocal version. 天使たちの記憶に流れる想いはかすかな希望信じて歌い続ける Once again composed by Michiru Yamane. And so, for a theme of Bloodstained, it shows up a few times on the soundtrack. I mean, it's the main title. It plays on the title screen of the game. I mean, that makes sense for the main theme. But this vocal version, I find especially interesting because there's a part in the game where there's a piano there, and Miriam can interact with it and sit down and plays this theme, the main theme of the game, I guess, and sings vocals. Now, if you're playing the game in English, it's a bit rough. I don't know what they were thinking when they hired the voiceover artist, the singer. It's just not the cleanest and best performance. But the soundtrack has this Japanese version, and there are some people who like playing with, the intended Japanese voiceover and vocals and all that, of course, with English text and all that. In fact, I saw a long play that was doing just that. So, yeah, this is why we went with the Japanese vocal version. And you know what? It sounds pretty good.
Guys, you don't need to translate songs into English. It doesn't work. It rarely works.
But what if they have meaningful lyrics to say?
Then put subtitles. We've solved this problem. I have not heard the English version, but the Japanese version that we are listening to here, like, very close second for favorite song on the soundtrack. The vocalist kills it. I don't know. Is it Yamane?
I don't think it's Yamane, but I couldn't really find who did sing it.
I wish we do, because she's absolutely killing it with the vocals, especially with, like, the minor key at the beginning, not in the clip, but, like, at the very beginning of the song, she's singing this really interesting key that, I don't know, catches your ear real well. I dig this song a lot.
I'm going to pass this vocal English version to you. I want to get your reaction.
Okay, here we go.
Cinder and blight veil the air, bring the night, and your eyes they close. Sweet repose suspended, the hours fly.
Yeah, no, not as good. The vocalist sounds like she's doing the best she can with what she's been handed. It's got some real lost in thoughts all alone energy to it.
Oh, that's exactly who sang it. What?
Wait, what?
Oh my gosh, looking at some more on... Raina Strober showed up in the comments to defend it. And she's the voice of Azura in Fire Emblem Fates.
I mean, again, she's a talented vocalist. It's not her fault. Whoever translated the lyrics.
Who directed her then? Let's pin it on the director. What the heck?
So here's the thing. Japanese is a much different language than English. And when you take a song written in Japanese and translate it into English, it doesn't work. Utada Hikaru taught us this because she wrote new lyrics to both of the Kingdom Hearts songs in English.
Well, there we go. We did some investigative work.
Live on air.
Look at that. Okay. We've got a couple tracks on the cutting room floor. I have two. The first of these is Autumn's Desolation. Hey, there's our boy. This one's composed by Keisuke Ito. And this song plays in the Oriental Sorcery Lab. I feel like that could have translated a little better. Okay. The grungy electric guitars here, mashed up with the Japanese instruments and percussion. I really dig this one. I don't know how much of an importance this Sorcery Lab plays in the game, but what a cool track to go with it, and just a great mashup of styles. And then you get those synth hits that come in there. This is a nice one. I really dig this. And again, good to have, a fresh composer inject a kind of fresh take on the music here. So yeah, it is Castlevania-like, but I mean, this sounds pretty fresh and interesting.
Two things. One, remember I said that Gears of Fortune was my favorite song on the Critical 5. That's because this is my favorite song on the list in general.
There you go.
This song absolutely rules. Not only does it remind me of some Castlevania in some way, but more so, I could hear this playing in a Yakuza game.
Yeah.
Like when you're trying to fight out of some building that's a bit more classic Japanese architecture, sort of like, I could definitely see Kiryu beating some people up to this song.
Kind of also makes me think of the Red Steel soundtrack. I know that's a weird pull.
Yeah.
But kind of makes me think of that too. Huh. The other one on the cutting room floor is Silent Howling. There you go, Joe. This is right up your alley.
Oh, yeah, it is.
This is composed by Ryusuke Fujioka, and it plays during the boss battles against Gremory and Orlok Dracul.
I wonder who that's supposed to be.
I think then they are pretty close to the end of the game. And it's interesting, this song also has like an 8-bit version on the soundtrack, so it's pretty important in that sense, I guess. It also plays during the Nintendo Switch gameplay trailer. And yeah, Joe, as you'll point out surely, and why I picked it especially for you, just insane violin work here. Of course, you get the frenetic pace for a boss fight, and that totally fits. And then the electric guitar comes in and it shreds, but wow, the musicianship on just full stage here. It's fantastic.
Yeah, those strings are really good. They're really, really, really good. I'd say this is another one where it's like, man, I regret having given away my violin. I couldn't have played this. I couldn't have played this at any point in my violin career. There's no way. It's so good. It's so cool. Oh, it's great.
A great soundtrack overall. What will I never forget about the game, though? Man, as much as I love Metroidvanias, the Castlevania side of things is something I still have yet to break through and actually make good, substantial progress in. But I liked what I played of Bloodstained until I got to that difficulty wall. Especially that's a tough fight against Zangetsu at first, man. Which, yeah, definitely when you hear David Hayter's voice coming through there, it's like, oh, what's up, David Hayter?
How you doing? I forgot you could be in games.
That's right. Are you allowed, Konami and all that? Okay. But yeah, no, just a fun game for sure. I don't think it's up there as like, all-time or even best games from 2019, but I think it did a good job of, for those that missed Symphony of the Night style games, I think this kind of filled that void. And hey, if they're making a sequel, all the more power to them.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to giving it a shot at some point in the future, but who knows when that will be. Anybody that's listened to me do anything in the past 10 years knows that that could mean I start next week or I start in 7 years.
That's pretty fair. All right, to transition to the next game, we like to highlight a fan cover or a fan remix, whether it's on YouTube, OC Remix, wherever. And this comes from YouTuber Gabo Karina 96. And he does a rock cover of Voyage of Promise. And it's neat to hear the actual, rock instrumentation there. Not necessarily some virtual instruments, but played instruments from Gabo Karina 96. Please enjoy, and we'll be right back.
Alright, mine is weird. I picked a really weird, low-key, easy game this week, just because, I felt like I needed the break, but I didn't want to just not do anything.
Getting back in the swing of things for the new year, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. So, what better way to do that than a small, hour-long game that nobody listening to this episode has ever heard of? So we're going to talk about Rainy Season. So what is Rainy Season? Well, it's a game that was originally released for PC on May 1st, 2020, but it was also available slightly before that, exclusively through Humble Monthly, because I believe some of it was funded by the Humble Original program. It is developed and published, though, by solo developer Inasa Fujio. So what is Rainy Season in terms of gameplay? Well, it's a very short narrative experience where you are put in control of a young child in Japan visiting the home of his grandmother. On the day the family was planning an outing to a local amusement park, it unfortunately begins to rain all day, causing them to have to cancel their plans. The player character, as this child, must then find various ways to kill time throughout the day, whether it be by interacting with his little brother, mom, aunt, or grandma, or by wandering into various daydream events throughout the house. It is a very, very, very short play. It goes about 45 minutes, maybe an hour in general. And this part of the episode is literally going to be longer than the entirety of the soundtrack. So that'll be fun. Anyways, this is where I will ask, hey Peter, have you ever even heard of Rainy Season?
I sure haven't. Take it away, Joe.
Perfect. It's just a really, really, really charming and laid-back game. It takes the whole thing of like, put this to a rainy mood to a whole nother level, because the whole game is a rainy mood. It's neat. It's only like $4 too, just on base price.
So there goes our theme that we figured out until, water sounds.
Yeah, there you go. I would recommend it if you like just very, very short little experiences. So Inasa Fujio, though, as I previously stated, he's actually a solo developer and he's based out of Japan. And he seems to specialize in smaller experiences. As far as I can tell, he seems to be almost completely self-taught in Unreal, which is bizarre because Unreal is super beginner not friendly. As somebody that has touched it for a brief moment, at least Unreal 4, that was the case with that. It was very, very difficult to figure out how to do anything for a while. I actually first became aware of Inasa Fujio because of his upcoming title, Inaka Project, which he described Rainy Season as being sort of a stepping stone to the completion of that game. And he's shown multiple screenshots and stuff of it. It's a game where you play as a mail deliverer in rural Japan on like a moped. And the instant I heard about that, I was like, oh, that game sounds made for me. That sounds great. It's very pretty. And I cannot wait for it to one day release, though there's no telling when that will be. And he also just does multiple smaller projects all the time. Like right now, he's working on a plane game. I don't know anything about it except that it involves planes, and Rainy Season happened to be one of these smaller projects. And by the way, he was making all of these while also working as a student studying illustration in college. He actually, I found out from one of the interviews I read for research, he graduated earlier this year in 2021 in July. So that's, hey, congrats, sir. You can actually follow him on Twitter at Inasa_Fujia. That's INASA_FUJIO. And he's recently been tweeting a bunch about the airplane game. And that's most of what you're going to see from him. So according to some interviews I was able to find, one of Fujio's major inspirations just in general, not even just for Rainy Season, but this sounds like a great place to have looked for inspiration in Rainy Season, is actually a niche Japan-only PlayStation game called Boku no Natsuyasumi, which translates roughly to My Summer Vacation, in which you play as a young boy in the Japanese countryside, killing time in the summer, doing things like catching bugs and finding bottle caps and other stuff. I've never heard of this game. Japan only is probably why, and also because I assume this game probably wasn't a smash hit on the PlayStation. Because, it sounds like it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea or even most people's cup of tea. But yeah, just from the description, the inspiration is incredible to see. Like, you can see it. It's clear. 100%. When they asked about his reasoning for making this small game while also making the bigger Inaka project, he said, quote, "I was burnt out from school when I started working on Rainy Season. Feeling that my passion for art was slipping away, I was struggling with workaholic symptoms and was obsessed with being productive. By revisiting a calmer moment in my life, I thought I could understand myself more and find people who felt the same way. The theme of rain established that calm mood, as well as serving as a plot point so that the game takes place in a confined space to account for the limited time budget. Makes sense. Put it in a small house, you don't need to spend a ton on assets. So his main goal, he wanted to try and portray, like, the creativity that kids stumble into when they're faced with extreme boredom. Like, he mentions, like, when you're an adult, you see moments of, like, extreme boredom as this sort of aggravating thing. Kids kind of have the same thing, but they have the ability to just be like, yeah, I'm bored now, so this branch I found in the yard is now a lightsaber. It's time for my sibling to die. That kind of thing. Basically, he wanted to sort of relay that concept as much as he could, which is where the daydream sequences come in, where they're just really surreal and obviously just something that the kid is imagining in his head because he's bored out of his damn mind. It's just, he was trying to tap into something he feels we lose as we grow into adults, and I can't say he's wrong, which is a little bit sad, but also is just how the human brain kind of works when subjected to capitalism. Another goal, though, he wanted to make the house feel truly lived in. Like, he wanted it to seem like a home where somebody has been living and not just an environment in a video game, which is actually a lot harder than you'd think. So, like, the house is messy. There's a bunch of stuff piled all over the shelves. There's a fan sitting on the tatami mat. There's, like, jars of liquid with fruits and vegetables in them, like pickling and all that. And you could just find all of this, and you could pick some stuff up and take it over to, like, your mom and be like, hey, look, remember this? Or, hey, what's this? That kind of thing.
It's always interesting when you do see that kind of lived-in home design in games. A couple that come to mind, I think Life is Strange is one, where Chloe's house feels that way. And then also in Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, the flashback sequence with, you know, Peter Quill and his mom. Like, their home is just like, it's gorgeous and it's designed so well with so many little knickknacks and trinkets around that kind of gives some character building and storytelling. It's so cool.
And I feel like Persona 4 does pretty all right at it with the Dojima house.
With its limitations, sure.
Yeah, and especially considering you see 2 rooms in that house and none other. But, like, it's really, really difficult to make a house that looks like humans lived there, because the only way that the homes that we live in get like that is we've been living there. And we've slowly infused our personality into the house around you. So doing it from scratch is legitimately super difficult. And I think that Fujio did a fantastic job at that, honestly. There's a lot of personality in your grandma's house in this game. And when asked about the daydream sequences and what sort of inspired them, he says, quote, each daydream was something that I imagined when I wandered around the house back then, thinking of the possibilities of what's beyond those locked doors. Funnily enough, I wanted to ask my past self the same question. How did you come up with these wild moments? Do I still have that creativity in me? Which is an existential question to ask for creatives, I feel like. Like, oh man, can I still think of the off-the-wall crap that I thought of when I was like 10? I don't think I can, honestly.
Yeah.
And when asked what he's hoping people will take away from Rainy Season, he said, quote, the memories that people revisit might be filled with regret, sorrow, happiness, or a mix of everything, and revisiting them can have different motivations. But going back to my initial idea of exploring my childhood and why I struggled with art as I grew up, I hope that revisiting these memories are not just a temporary escape from reality, but a self-reflection on where you came from and how you can take those discoveries and apply them to your current self. The most than anybody probably would have seen this game. It was featured in a Wholesome Games Direct. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was featured in the first Wholesome Games Direct, which that's been a thing for the past, I think it started last year.
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah, and it's just this group called Wholesome Games, and they talk about just sort of the more casual, relaxing, less action-oriented games, for better or for worse. But that's a good place to keep an eye on if you just want to find some weird stuff like Rainy Season. How niche and weird is Rainy Season? Well, it doesn't have enough reviews to get a Metacritic score. Metacritic lists 2 reviews for Rainy Season in total. But they're both 70, which is honestly about what I'd give it, maybe a 75, I don't know. And as far as I could tell, Fujio is still working on an Naka project and the airplane game that I've mentioned like 3 times now. So, hey, hopefully a Naka project comes out someday. Now, in terms of like who did the music, this is actually kind of weird because it's a group that did it. There is a singular composer that did a majority of the stuff, but he's a member of this group. And that group is called the Watanabe Strings. And couldn't actually find a ton of information on them. I was kind of hoping having a group name would be like, oh, I'll be able to find some history of this group or something. Nope, couldn't. The music of the game was mostly composed by Yotaro Sago, but the soundtrack as a whole is credited to Watanabe Strings. And featured on this soundtrack, you can hear Yotaro Sago on piano, Mitsuyasu Shimozuru on guitar, Naoko Wakatabe on violin, Yoshifumi Morono on cello, and Watanabe himself on bass. In terms of discography for these people, a couple of them have worked on other games before. Not a lot, but some of them. Sago specifically worked on music for a Toho arranged album called A Night at the Scarlet Mansion, which we talked about, a Toho game.
Yeah, it sounds like it ties into Toho 6, the game we covered, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wakatabe, the violinist of the group, she actually performs violin on the soundtracks for Final Fantasy XIII 2 and God Eater 2, but she is also featured as a performer on the Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross arrangement album Too Far Away Times. Murono, who is the cellist, he's performed on God Eater 2, and he also played cello on a album called Memoria, the Very Best of Yoko Shimomura, a compilation soundtrack of some of her best works. So that's really cool there. As far as I could tell, though, for Watanabe, this is the only game soundtrack that is listed as him being in the credits. So take that as what you will. In terms of historical development research, I couldn't find anything.
That's not surprising.
Yeah, it's not surprising. I actually found more than I thought I was going to find, which is dire when you think about how short this has already been. On the recording, I don't know how long this ends up being in the final. We're at 16 minutes. The soundtrack on Spotify says it is 8.5 minutes long. So we have already been talking longer than it would take to listen to the entire soundtrack. And speaking of that soundtrack, let's jump on into it with our 5 critical tracks, the first of which is Aurelia. So the game, for the most part, is silent in terms of music, because, the rain. The rain is the backdrop to everything going on. But when a daydream sequence starts, that's when the music jumps in. This one, in particular, plays during a daydream where the kid is looking at a keychain they got from a trip to the aquarium, and he's remembering how much he really liked jellyfish. And outside in the rain, you start seeing these glowing jellyfish just sort of swimming through the air. And this song is just, in general, a very, very good piece to put in front to be like, this is the vibe that rainy season is going to have.
Yeah, it's a nice little duet with the piano, and the acoustic guitar is a nice little surprise too. You get then the violin that comes in kind of near the end of the clip there and supplements things. But yeah, wow, it's a real nice vibe. When you talk about wholesome directs and things like that, this feels like wholesome music to go with a wholesome game.
Very much so. But I'm more of a fan of the tone that comes in critical track number 2, being Something in the Storeroom. So for this daydream, you walk into the storage room and there's just like a shadow monster in there, chilling and watching TV. And the kid's like, "What are you doing here? What are you?" "I'm watching TV, man. What do you want from me?" I'm just here. Just watching. Can't I watch it in peace? And I think that this song really brings about like sort of the absurdity and the whimsy of that scene. It's my favorite scene in the game. Because the kid asks, Grandma says that when I'm bad, she's going to call the monsters. Does this mean I'm a bad kid? And the shadow monster just responds with, "Oh, I guess I got the wrong house. Bye." And then just vanishes. And I feel that in my soul. I think this song's a lot of fun. It's my favorite daydream piece in general.
I think when you talk about meeting a shadow monster, you wouldn't expect the nice slow swing of the song, but when you talk about the humor that goes with it, then yeah, that checks out. I really like this one. I kind of imagine it as almost like it would also fit in like a nice jazzy restaurant, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, I could hear this playing in the background of like a restaurant scene in something. It's fun. I like it. Critical track number 3 is Japanese Doll. This one's a weird one. I mean, they're all weird, but this is the weirdest one, I think. Because, like, you're looking at this antique doll that is sitting next to, like, the grandfather's sort of shrine. And the doll starts talking to you after the kid's like, all of these dolls look super creepy. Because guess what, everybody? Old dolls look creepy. They're the creepiest thing in the world. All of them. The older the doll is, the more terrifying it looks. She's kind of got this arrogant tone to her that she's talking to him with, and she's basically like, "Yeah, your grandfather was super cool and loved me a lot."
But
she refers to him as the lord of the house. And I guess the kid like brings up like, I think you're a little bit scary. That's why I couldn't sleep in here. As somebody who grew up with a great-grandmother where there was a room with literally 50 teddy bears piled up around the walls, I feel this one in my heart. That's creepier than it sounds, trust me. But yeah, I think this piece kind of has like some bounciness to it, but it also, you can kind of feel her sort of like, "You think I'm creepy? Get out of here, child." You can feel that vibe to it, too.
This piece kills me because it reminds me so much of another video game track, and I I can't think of what it is, but like this da da dun dun da dun da 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 da, like this kind of like bouncy waltzy to it. Like it's one of those things, and it's gonna drive me nuts. But I also like the prolonged piano section. It's kind of building on like some kind of chords underneath it that have a little bit of a dissonance to it, and that has some interesting sort of repercussions to it, if you will, just kind of representing the overall discomfort of this creepy doll.
Old dolls are just creepy, man. They're just all creepy. There's no old doll that's not terrifying. All right, let's get into the final Daydream track in the game. It is critical track number 4, Silence. So I'd actually forgotten about this Daydream before I went and pulled up a long play to make sure I knew where all the songs played. This one plays during a Daydream where after a siren goes off in town to be like, hey, it's rained enough that the river's starting to flood, so don't go anywhere near the river. He starts to imagine, like, what if the whole town flooded and the front yard was just underwater and had a bunch of, like, really pretty fish swimming in it. And that's the whole Daydream. It's very cute and very, very, very laid back, even more so than the rest of it. And I think this song helps a lot, especially like, oh my god, the cellist is killing it in this one specifically. Just, it's nice. It feels nice.
I think this is my favorite song here. And it's interesting how for a track called Silence, it is very much not.
Yeah.
But it is just gorgeous, though. You're right. The cello is really doing some great lifting here. Just really carrying the fullness of the sound and the piano behind it as well. It's just beautiful. I really like this one. I can just totally vibe out to this one.
I agree. It's great. But my favorite track, personally, is critical track number 5. This is Amayadori.
しようたまにはみんな何もしないでいい夕暮れ間近に窓開けた打ち込む雨が心地よかった水たまり溶けた夏の匂い淡く広がる
The title of this song apparently roughly translates to taking shelter from the rain, so that's fitting. That sounds good. Lyrics and composition were by Mitsuyasu Shimazuru, but vocals in this song are by Ayane Homiya. And this is the credit song. And I just think it's really good, honestly. It's very short, it's very simple, there's not much to it, but the vocalist is killing it, and at one point, there it is, everybody. There is a sound of a raindrop falling into a puddle to sort of throw you into the chorus, I guess. I don't know if you can call it a chorus when it's literally just the second half of the song. But I think you get what I mean. And I think that's just a very nice touch. And I don't know. It hits that chord of just like acoustic guitar vocal songs. And then eventually it pulls in the piano, and it's just a really, really good song. And it's basically the reason I wanted to bring the game to the show.
And it makes sense. It's definitely a vibe that I think gets kind of channeled when Professor Layton games have their ending credits theme. Like you could totally imagine this piece being at the end of a Layton game. Granted, this singer not as famous as some of the idols and singers that Level 5 gets for some of those closing themes, but it's definitely what it makes me think of. And you're right, the water sounds being the theme, tying together in addition to the cost of the game. But yeah, that's definitely a water drop kind of leading into the, you're right, quote unquote chorus. That's a nice one. I think it's a perfect way to end this little game experience.
So there's nothing on the cutting room floor because you've now heard every song on the soundtrack except for one 30-second track at the start.
We did it!
There's nothing to put here. So what will I never forget about Rainy Season? Hey, you know what? You out there, if you dig sort of the stuff you've heard about in this episode, you should go try Rainy Season. It'll only kill like an hour of your day. And it's very, very charming. It's very clear that it was made by one person, but it's very, very charming. I think it could do with a little bit more talk about it in general, honestly.
I think for all that's out there about the game and for a game that not many people have heard of, I certainly haven't heard of it, I think you did a really good job. And I think even more to your point, it is super affordable. Less than $5, and for less than $10 or $10 exactly, you could get a Stadia Pro subscription if you really want to play Bloodstained as a free pro game there, but also just find Bloodstained on sale, to be honest. But yes, the late discovered themes of water noises in our Critical 5. There you go. That's the theme connecting these two games this week: Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night, and Rainy Season. So that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakeasy. Joe is over at StringPixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast that you want, and that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smasherpieces, is hosted, and you can find Smasherpieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a feed of podcast episodes, but also a Spotify playlist, where if we talk about a video game track and it's on Spotify, it gets added to this monster playlist of video game music. Joe, what's being added this week?
Surprisingly, Bloodstained is not on Spotify.
What?
Yeah, I'm really surprised about that, but it's just not. But Rainy Season, shockingly, is, which is the only reason I was able to do this.
Yeah, it was like the only place we could find the music playing anywhere.
Yeah, it's not even on YouTube anywhere. So, like, that's the place to go if you're gonna listen to it, I guess.
Perfect. And when you're done listening to the music in the show, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST, where you can leave some feedback for us, how we do with these episodes, as well as suggestions for games that we should cover in 2022. Yep, we're starting to build those up. There's a lot to cover, a lot of open spaces on our 2022 calendar, so leave us some recommendations. What should we talk about coming up? Speaking of coming up, Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Next week, I'll be talking about Andy Tunstall.
I will be talking about Masato Koda.
That's a name that probably should have come up earlier.
Probably should have, and it's a good game to bring up, finally. All right, Joe, let's play us out.
So again, you can't find this music anywhere. So of course, nobody's done a cover, even though, hey, video game YouTube, Amayadori is like a song that I want to hear covers of, honestly. I think it would be great. On the soundtrack, there's an off-vocal version of Amayadori, and that's what we're going to play out with, I suppose. So enjoy that.
Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. Have a happy start to your 2022, and we'll see you next time. Take care.